We're back with the roundtable. Next up, Cheney versus Cheney. A new YouTube golden oldie has Dick Cheney explaining back in '94 why going into Baghdad is a bad idea. Let's watch. I am overwhelmed by how smart this was.
Do you think that the U.S. or UN forces should have moved into Baghdad?
No.
Why not?
Because if we'd gone to Baghdad, we would have been all alone. There wouldn't have been anybody else with us. It would have been a U.S. occupation of Iraq. None of the Arab forces that were willing to fight with us in Kuwait were willing to invade Iraq. Once you got to Iraq and took it over and took down Saddam Hussein's government, then what are you going to put in its place? That's a very volatile part of the world, and if you take down the central government in Iraq, you can easily end up seeing pieces of Iraq fly off. Part of it the Syrians would like to have to the west. Part of eastern Iraq the Iranians would like to claim, fought over for 8 years. In the north, you've got the Kurds, and if the Kurds spin loose and join with the Kurds in Turkey, then you threaten the territorial integrity of Turkey. It's a quagmire if you go that far and try to take over Iraq. The other thing was casualties. Everyone was impressed with the fact that we were able to do our job with as few casualties as we had. But for the 146 Americans killed in action and for their families, it wasn't a cheap war. And the question for the president in terms of whether or not we went on to Baghdad and took additional casualties in an effort to get Saddam Hussein was how many additional dead Americans is Saddam worth? And our judgment was not very many, and I think we got it right.
Okay, now we know we had 9/11 subsequent to that, but the points that he made had to do not with the world situation the United States faces, Melanie, but with the situation in Iraq as it's likely to take place, as it has taken place once we attempted to occupy. First of all, the failure to, our difficulty in finding someone to run the place. Secondly, the inevitable coming apart of the country by confessional group. And third, the number of casualties. Dick Cheney had it nailed, and yet he was apparently the #1 proponent of the war. How do you put this together?
Okay, well, let me just first of all say that Dick Cheney of September 10th was a different one than of September 11th, and you glossed over that very quickly.
But Iraq was Iraq.
We have had 3,000 American lives lost as a result of Islamic terrorists.
Prediction of what's going to happen in Iraq.
Islamic terrorists who attacked us in this country.
How does that relate to how the outlook in Iraq was the same then as it's turned out to be now? He had it right about Iraq. Iraq didn't have anything to do with 9/11.
No, he didn't. Saddam Hussein was killed. He was taken out. His two murderous thugs. He was absolutely killed by United States military forces. We have vital American interests to be represented in the region, and it is as important for us to be in Iraq today as it was 10 years ago.
But his predictions were absolutely accurate. He was prescient as hell about the difficulty of finding a government to replace Saddam, the difficulty of holding together an Iraq post-Saddam Hussein, and the inevitable large number of casualties. He was right about everything, and yet we went into Iraq thanks to him. I don't get it. I don't get it.
I can see a gleam in your eye, Chris. You are just thrilled.
No, you can't, because you can't see me.
I can see it in the monitor. Yes, I can see you in the monitor right now. And what I can see, what I can tell is you're having a great time trying to make Dick Cheney look like a hypocrite. That's what you're trying to do.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's exactly what we have had some very serious things take place. We are in Iraq for the right reasons. We are trying to stop the spread of Islamic terrorism. I'm trying to figure out why a man who was so brilliant in seeing the future didn't act on his brilliance. Let me go to Naomi on that.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the nature of lying. Let's not forget that they got us into this war on the basis of a series of lies to the UN, lies about aluminum tubes, lies about the involvement of Iraq with 9/11, which Melanie just underscored again to befuddle the American people. Frank Rich showed that 53% of the American people think Iraq had everything to do with 9/11. They had nothing to do with 9/11. And this weaving out of lies was a pretext for an invasion that served their own political purposes. In the wake of the invasion, they were able to terrify the American people, subjugate the American people, drive through a series of laws that dismantled key checks and balances, allowed overreaching executive power, and completely eviscerated, what the founders set in place, thus weakening America. Fundamentally.
Let me just say one thing, Naomi, because you're going to look great in a burka.
Craig,
you're going to look super in a burka.
Your sense of figuring this out.
Well, I do think there's a 9/11 component. Let me just attempt this explanation. Is what I've heard from sympathizers to Cheney is that he really came to believe after 9/11 that our more pacifist policies, not going after Hussein, pulling out of Lebanon in the Reagan administration, had led to emboldening terrorists and led to 9/11. Therefore,
well, how did going back into Iraq lessen the emboldenment?
I think what has been explained to me is he believed that it was time to show great strength and preemptive doctrine meant a lot to him. That going into Iraq would send a signal to the rest of the world, other countries harboring terrorists,
by the way, Melanie,
and how tough we would be.